Okay, so Jason says, what has happened to us? Fair and balanced research that this channel used to have. That one was like, no, he didn't. The one-child rule of China was a response to overpopulation problems caused by Mao's policy encouraging as many children as possible because of a high infant mortality rate. As the mortality rate went down and the population spiked, there was a policy to decrease, but there was never any government policy that placed value sex over the other. Now, I'm going to go into some articles. So that's that thought about what he thinks I said and what I said concerning policies, government, and society, and how they value the male over the female. So we're going to see if I can find any supporting evidence that goes into that. It was the parents, not the government, who placed more value on boys than girls because they depended on physical labor from the children. Those who decided to keep daughters had resources for an only child to push the girl into education. I believe I shared that too, but to also increase their financial gain utility for the family, not to raise them as suitable partners for men in the future. These are miseducation decisions by parents, not the government. And lastly, he says, this video that you're taking notes on specifically say that this is an NGO a think tank that is proposing to the government, not government policy. Who gives a D about what NGO's ideas? Come on, you can do better than this. Now, to my point that the government is involved with this leftover woman conversation. Xingnu is the name or the common translation for leftover ladies. It's a derogatory term popularized by the All China Women's Federation that classify women who remain unmarried in their late 20s and beyond. Okay? Let's see here. Wait a minute. The term, let's see, most prominently used in China, the term has also been used colloquially to refer to women in India and North America and other parts of Asia. The term has gone on to become widely used in the mainstream media and has been the subject of several television series, magazine, newspaper articles, book publications, focusing on the negative connotation and positive reclamation of the term. While initially backed and disseminated by pro-government media in 2007, the term eventually came under criticism from government-published newspapers 2 years later. The China Daily described the Xing News as a social force to be reckoned with, and others have argued the term should be taken as a positive to mean successful women. Now, hold on one moment. So we jump down. It says the exact etymology of the term is not conclusively known, but most reliable sources cite it as having entered the mainstream in 2006. The China Daily reported in 2011 that Zhu Wei, the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine China, coined the term. The term Xingnu literally translates to leftover ladies or leftover women. The China Daily newspaper further reported that the term originally gained popularity in the city of Shanghai and later grew to nationwide prominence. Listen, the government, right? Here it comes. In 2007, the Ministry of Education of the People's Republic of China released an official statement defining Xingnu as unmarried women over the age of 27 and added it to the national lexicon. According to several sources, the government mandated the All China Women's Federation to publish a series of articles stigmatizing unwed women who were in their late 20s. I adjure anyone who's interested. As they said earlier, there is a number of articles, newspapers, books that are read. The government has taken out billboards, as I shared, I believe, in the clip that I was talking about. They have wrote campaigns through different arms of the government to encourage women, to incentivize women to marry, because if they don't, it's going to be a real problem. So concerning my assertion that China there was a society that preferred and valued boys over girls, and the thought that it wasn't just the parents, it was society, because parents are individuals that make up families that are part of society, that is a part of a thought process within the governmental structure. If you simply research China's preference for boys, meaning more value for whatever reason, you will see a plethora of articles. China's great gender crisis, son preference in China, China couple wants boys, a Chinese family tragedy and the preference for boys. Why does modern urban China still prefer sons? Why did Chinese people prefer sons over daughters in the past? China's one-child policy effects on sex ratio. Why is son preference so persistent in East and Southern Asia? But I wanted to click on this one because I already did, right? And it's from PubMed. It's a governmental National Library of Medicine. And I just wanted to read quickly. This was something that was done, a survey in 1982. And the challenge was that the government really didn't have any policies in place that, quote, preferred the boy over the girl. But look at what their policies actually did do with the mindset that society already had. It says here that demographers of the East and West Population Institute and the China State Family Planning Commission, jointly analyzing data from the computer tapes of China 1982 National Fertility Survey, had produced new evidence of the extent to which families in China prefer male children. This is 1982. They started in 1979, this one-child policy, officially in 1980. 2 years later, this policy, on top of the mentality of the people, let's see what it did. Evidence exists in almost every part of China that couples prefer sons to daughters. That's what I was speaking to. According to researchers Fred Arnold and Zhang Yang, only Beijing and Shanghai are exemptions to this pattern. These are these cosmopolitan areas. The persistence of such attitudes in China demonstrates the difficulty of overcoming deeply rooted Confucian traditions. Following the Chinese Revolution, the government guaranteed sexual equality in political, economic, and cultural life, but patriarchal attitudes still prevail, particularly in the countryside. So the government is like, everything's going to be equal, but the people are not necessarily moving with that, okay? So historically, couples have favored sons for a variety of reasons, including to continue the family name, provide security for the parents' old age, add the family labor force, and perform ancestral rites. Believing that such attitudes block implementation of China's one-child family policy, the government has launched a campaign to try to change them. So the government is there like, okay, playing tug-of-war with these thought processes, but the policies, like I said, that's put in place, they began to reinforce these already established thought processes. So let's see here. Where are we? At the time of the 1982 fertility survey, China's one-child certificate program had been in effect for 3 years. The program provides incentives such as monetary bonuses, preferential housing allocation, and special considerations for the child in education and job assignments to couples who agree not to have a second child. According to the survey, 37% of all one-child couples had accepted the one-child certificate. Significantly, 60% of all one-child certificate holders have a son. Of couples whose first child was a boy, 40% obtained the one-child certificate versus only 34% of those whose first child was a girl. Despite penalties for renouncing the one-child certificate, about 1 out of every 10 mothers in the program had given birth to a second child by the time of the survey. The first child of these mothers was twice as likely to be a girl as to be a boy. Son preference is strongest in the towns and rural farm villages and weakest in the cities. Further evidence that traditional attitudes have a strong impact on the preferences for son. So what exactly I said, let me get one more source for policy and society's preference for males, or society's preference for males and how governmental policy, let me just correct it, right? How governmental policy affected this. Son preference in China. Despite the old Chinese proverb according to which women hold up half the sky, Chinese families prefer having sons instead of daughters. As a consequence, China faces nowadays millions of missing women, as many of its neighboring countries. Son preference is often considered as a recent phenomenon, whereas it is an old characteristic of Chinese society, so it is not new. So government doesn't mean modern government. This is the mentality of that specific country. A long time before the 1979 one-child policy, sex ratio was already unbalanced between boys and girls due to a high number of infanticides, killing the child after the child is born. Normally, the natural higher proportion of boys at birth is compensated by their higher mortality rate. But in China, girls are more likely to be neglected during their childhood and receive less medical treatments than boys. As a result, the sex ratio, instead of decreasing, grows higher through ages. And they're giving you a source. The unbalanced ratio was further reinforced by the introduction. The unbalanced ratio was further reinforced by the introduction of the one-child policy and consequential sex-selective abortion. Following the implementation of the one-child policy, sex-selective technology spread in China around 1985. At the same date, sex ratio at birth raised sharply, allowing researchers to think that these methods are used to decide to keep or not the fetus according to its gender. And you can go more, but that's again how policy and society had a preference, or policy helped to reinforce society's preference for the male. So I'm going to play what I said and then wrap this up. For a while now, but I saw somebody cover the story, and they didn't necessarily, because they wanted to spin it in a certain way, they didn't cover it like how this newscaster is covering it, which is giving the context as to why you have this disparity between males and females. It's very important, because China is an example that a mentality within the government structure and within society that valued the male's contribution more than the female created a policy of which the female was less favorable. She was sold, she was taken to orphanages, she was oftentimes aborted, infanticide, because you got one shot to get that male. So the parents, many, would do all of these things so that they can erase that female. Literally, that's why we have missing women in this culture, and aggrandize the male. Now, there were some parents who said, no, we're not. Okay, so pause. Hopefully that cleared up any questions or comments or thoughts about where I was getting my information from. Is everywhere, but definitely I could see how just looking at the video that I shared and not giving the reference in the comment section would lead one to believe that I'm skewing the story for whatever thought process you might have.